So, welcome to this interview with Leon Van Kamen. For those who don't know him, he's a creative technologist and researcher specializing in XR fragments and 4D URL protocols. Don't worry if you don't have a clue about what this is, because we have here Leon to translate us from tech language to English. So thank you for joining us, first of all. I would like to start this interview by asking you to give us a brief introduction for those who don't know your work or do not have a technological background to what XR Fragments is and how you came up with this idea.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this beautiful place, to Malaga. Gracias. And, well, let me start with the easiest, the last question. How did I came up with this? This is something what I also ask myself sometimes, like how did I end up here? And I don't really have a good answer to that. I just play with a lot of open source technologies. I read, I watch movies, and I guess that's how things happen at some point to certain new ideas. And I'm pretty big over there. I'm not used to seeing that. But anyways, what XR Fragment is a way to it basically gives you a surfboard to surf 3D data, 3D content. So normally our content, 3D content, is sort of locked into a game or into some app, and that data, there's no way to sort of connect with each other's. And XR Fragments is basically using the URL, which we use in web browsers, as a sort of surfboard, as a sort of liberating way to connect our data with each other's without having the need for apps connecting with each other's or installing an app through an app store. So it kind of like liberates and makes it easier to navigate in 3D. Here you can see that the URL here, it sort of starts to sit in between the 3D data of both devices. So you have this smartphone, you have a VR headset, and with XR Fragments, every 3D world gets its own address. And not only its own address, even content inside this world also gets sort of a sub-address. So here we have an interior design, which somebody created in a game or an app. And this can be addressed now. And this could be anything. It could be a 3D object file or a program. It doesn't really matter. If we jump into our headset, into another app, into another 3D experience, not only can we teleport to this other place, but we can also import a URL, an address, to this space and sort of have a mirror of this interior design in this other app. So it's basically creating a hypermedia web between the data. So not between apps. There's no code. It's just the data contains extra metadata, extra links, extra URLs, which makes the data so smart that it can basically connect, they reference to each other's. And this is, in a nutshell, what it does, and we will go through this whole process again and again to hopefully make you understand it even better. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is true that we use URLs for everything, day to day, for sharing a website or even a restaurant where we want to go. So it makes sense to introduce this technology also for 3D. I know you're also currently developing a 4D URL protocol, and I quote literally, for 3D discovery, linking, backup, navigation, and querying. That's a lot. Could you break down what this protocol aims to achieve?
So what it basically achieves is that it basically is very friendly to all the 3D objects ever made in computers, on smartphones, VR headsets, and it sort of converts, it turns these 3D objects into URLs, and by just analyzing the 3D content, there is so much information already in these 3D objects that it's very easy to sort of generate URLs out of those. And since they are URLs, it's very minimal. It's very simple. They are just URLs. You don't need a blockchain. You don't need all kinds of, let's say, NFTs, or you don't even have to think about a metaverse. It's just URLs. And since they are URLs inside the data, you can also just save them as a file, these 3D worlds, onto your USB stick, onto your smartphone. And actually, this is a very sustainable way to sort of let our data live longer, because now you no longer have to buy a smartphone to enjoy certain content in this app through this app store, or a TV with its own app store and an app. And so you get like all the devices become viewers of the same content. So this is a very eco-friendly way of sort of liberating all the 3D data which is hidden inside our apps. It's locked inside our apps. So yeah, that's there's much more to it, but this is sort of the basis of it.
Thank you for the explanation. It makes sense. So while you were talking, I was thinking about how could we wrote down this technology to the real world, to the day-to-day. So my question is, what kind of positive social impact could the XR fragments make compared to just sticking with app stores? And also I wanted to ask you, what does the hypermedia exactly mean? Because that's a term that we're starting to hear.
Well, that's a great question. Let me start with the hypermedia. The hypermedia is basically hyper-connected media. So if you, for example, watch a TikTok video or you check Google Maps, this is not really hypermedia. It's like very shallow. All the links, all the hyper stuff is accessible for the big tech companies, but we cannot really see that. And with hypermedia, we basically get data which is hyper-connected and hyper-viewable through all kinds of different apps. A web browser is a hypermedia viewer, basically. The other question that was something I just forgot. What was it again?
About the social impact that
the social impact, yeah. So I think since these days there is technology available which sort of synthesizes 3D content from 2D content. So all the images uploaded to, let's say, social media can now be sort of synthesized into 3D. So this, I think, also creates a sort of positive opportunity for museums, schools, universities, libraries, local governments to look at their digital archive with all their pictures of the past, of Malaga, how Malaga was in the past, how the library was in the past, certain buildings, and sort of take control and authority over these future 3D versions of those, and sort of say, okay, we are going to manage this. We will take sort of ownership of this process, and we will not. We're not going to be very how to say. We're going to take it very seriously if, let's say, a Google Maps suddenly starts to offer a 3D version of Malaga where people can visit and you have guides in VR. That would be really weird. So I think there is a big opportunity here to sort of take control over the 3D synthesis which will happen in the future concerning what I just said, all these things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So I would like to continue the conversation, but I'm going to be kicked out of the couch, as I said. So I would like to end, I propose to close this talk by playing the role of visionaries. So we are talking more and more about XR and virtual reality and this kind of technologies. So my question is, what is your personal vision for XR fragments and virtual reality for the next years, and if you see any trend that we should follow?
Yeah, I see some trend which we should not follow, and we should not follow the trend of the big tech companies which basically say we're gonna replace things in the real world, and we're gonna sort of move them to the digital world. So it would be a bit silly to sort of have to play tennis in VR, while we can also just play tennis in the normal world, which makes much more sense. So I would love to see VR to be used for hyper learning, hyper experiences, things we cannot do in the real world, and that we perhaps use it as an introspective tool. Not so much as a social tool. It's more like a book. Like if I would read a book here, it would be not really social. And this is, I think, how we should keep looking at VR headsets, AR headsets. We should not be walking around on the streets with them. It would be a bit silly. So I really hope that the trend, which is usually a bit like, yeah, we're all going to be in the metaverse and this is where the work will happen. I think we should take that with a huge grain of salt. And I think, that's one small thing. I think, for example, if I touch this table in VR, if this would teleport me to another place, let's say, the place where this table was made, these kind of hyper experiences, they really belong in VR, I think. And this, of course, never happens in reality. You see, nothing happens. So I think that's how we should sort of separate it in a healthy way, this VR, AR, and the real life, which is actually the best reality for so much learning and social experiences like this. Like, you cannot beat this with AR or VR.
I totally agree. So thank you for joining us today. And I don't know if we have time for one question. So the winner is?
Me again. You say that you can take any 3D object and implement it into XR fragments. But 3D objects are coming in many formats. Like you have the Blender, OBG, 3ds, etc., etc. Do you support all these formats, or?
Yes.
Right.
Because I looked at it. Great question, by the way. Perfect. I looked at these formats and I was thinking, what are the similarities? Because I am sort of a developer who doesn't really like to develop, so I'm sort of lazy, so I don't want to invent another 3D format which would be the ultimate, which it never is. So I looked at all the 3D object formats and I noticed a sort of similarity which applies to all of them. They are hierarchical in structure, and all the objects have names. So this is how this automatic name resolution, which you saw there, the interior design for Maria, they can automatically be sort of mapped from these names, which are in all the 3D objects. So this was basically something I thought I had to invent something, but it was already in there. So that was a great question.
So that's it. You can go home and sleep.
Muchas gracias, chicos. Vale,
Thank you very much. So before the break, just a 10-minute break, But not before before the break, we have to invite over Sonia.
La sabiduría. Merecemos la entrega. Vulnerables o no, las herramientas nos pertenecen. Arriesgamos para confiar. Eleonora Lima. Atención. Software racista. Desaprender para situar las culturas en el centro. Ralentizar la velocidad. Nuestro ritmo conecta mejor con lo humano. Leon Van Kamen. Viajamos por lugares extraños, teletransportados y acompañados siempre por objetos reales o inanimados. ¿Soñamos en 3D? Viajamos por lugares extraños, elijamos nuestro camino.